Ukraine strikes on Russian oil facilities tighten pressure on Moscow's energy supplies while winter demand looms. This is Omni View, episode 139. Ukrainian forces launched a large drone attack on Russian oil refining facilities across multiple regions. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated the strikes aim to increase economic pressure on Moscow. Russian authorities reported at least 12 deaths in one affected area in Tatarstan. The Guardian account recorded Ukrainian drone activity targeting 16 regions with more than 450 unmanned aerial vehicles. The Guardian reported the attacks as part of Ukraine's effort to target energy infrastructure that funds Russia's war effort. Japan Times coverage of related regional diplomacy noted that such strikes occur alongside separate talks involving Oman on broader security matters. Both accounts describe undisputed damage to refining capacity. They differ on whether the primary goal is immediate battlefield effect or longer-term strain on Russian state revenue. The Guardian placed the operation within a pattern of repeated Ukrainian strikes on fuel production sites. The Japan Times framed the same events against ongoing diplomatic signals from Tehran about an Oman-mediated agreement. Energy aspects analysts cited in Bloomberg coverage warned that any sustained reduction in Russian diesel output would compound an already tightening global supply picture ahead of Northern Hemisphere winter demand. Observers will track winter diesel availability and any further Ukrainian targeting of energy assets. Shifting now to developments in Iran. Tehran named Mohsen Rezai, previously known for supporting Iran's nuclear program, to head the Supreme National Security Council. The move follows statements that an agreement with Oman is very close. Japan Times reporting placed the appointment immediately after Iranian officials described the Oman Channel as nearing completion. Rezai's earlier public positions included explicit calls for advancing Iran's nuclear capabilities. Japan Times described the appointment as a signal that Iran intends to maintain firm positions even while pursuing the Oman Channel. Al Jazeera, reporting on related Gaza developments, noted that Iranian officials continue to reject certain external proposals on regional conflicts. The factual sequence of the appointment and the Oman statement is not disputed. Outlets differ on whether the personnel change strengthens or complicates the diplomatic track. Japan Times emphasized the contrast between Rezai's hardline record and the simultaneous diplomatic outreach. Al Jazeera connected the security team change to Iran's broader stance on Gaza-related proposals. Attention will focus on whether the new council leadership advances or delays final terms with Oman. Meanwhile, voting took place in Pakistan-administered Kashmir in a limited number of constituencies after 7 of 11 seats in the Poonch division were postponed. Boycott calls and violence affected parts of the region. Al Jazeera recorded that authorities proceeded only where security conditions permitted, leaving the third phase significantly smaller than originally planned. Al Jazeera reported that unrest and boycott appeals led to the scaled-back ballot. The outlet noted that local authorities proceeded with polling where security conditions allowed. The reduced scope of the vote and the presence of disruptions are established facts. Perspectives diverge on whether the process still confers legitimacy or mainly highlights governance strains. Al Jazeera framed the postponements as evidence of ongoing local resistance. Official statements cited security concerns as the sole reason for the reduced schedule. Results from the completed constituencies and any rescheduling of postponed seats will be monitored. Record heat and drought are disrupting Europe's power, shipping, and health systems. Prolonged high temperatures and dry conditions this summer reduced hydropower output, slowed river transport, and increased heat-related health burdens across several European countries. Japan Times documented measurable declines in power generation tied to low reservoir levels and simultaneous spikes in cooling demand. River shipping volumes also fell as water levels dropped below navigable thresholds on major European waterways. Japan Times outlined measurable drops in power generation and shipping volumes tied directly to low water levels and high demand. The account links these effects to the same weather pattern rather than separate policy failures. European governments have responded with targeted water and energy restrictions. The scale of the physical impacts is not contested. Japan Times presented the disruptions as direct physical consequences of the drought rather than policy shortcomings. The same report recorded that multiple countries implemented emergency limits on water use and power exports to manage the shortfall. Energy and transport ministries will report on any further adjustments to generation and navigation schedules. Japan's inflation rate edged down after a statistical revision. Japan's consumer price index was revised, resulting in a 0.1 percentage point decline in the reported inflation rate. Nikkei Asia attributed the change to updated weighting within the index basket rather than any sudden shift in actual prices paid by households. The Statistics Office applied the revision retroactively to recent months, producing the lower headline figure. Nikkei Asia stated that the adjustment reflects updated weighting in the index rather than an abrupt change in price trends. The revision itself is a technical step by the Statistics Office. Market participants are now assessing whether underlying price pressures remain on their prior path. Nikkei Asia noted that policymakers continue to watch core measures that exclude fresh food and energy, which showed smaller movement after the same reweighting. The Bank of Japan's next policy meeting will incorporate the revised series when evaluating whether inflation has durably reached the 2% target. A survey by Hong Kong University of Science and Technology found that 72.7% of local working professionals use artificial intelligence tools weekly, more than double the global average reported in the same study. The poll gathered responses from 3,722 professionals between March and April, with more than 60% of participants aged 30 to 49. South China Morning Post reported that junior staff expressed greater concern about job security linked to AI adoption. The survey covered more than 3,700 respondents between March and April. The usage figure and the anxiety gap by seniority are presented as direct survey results. South China Morning Post highlighted the contrast between high adoption rates and the sharper anxiety reported by junior employees. The university researchers presented the data as evidence of rapid workplace integration. The study recorded that weekly usage exceeded global benchmarks by more than twofold across the sampled cohort. Now, some progress worth knowing about. President Prabowo Subianto put forward acting Bank Indonesia Governor Destri Damayanti as the only candidate to head the central bank. The Wall Street Journal recorded the nomination as a step that removes uncertainty over succession at the Monetary Authority. Damayanti has served as acting governor since the previous term ended. The Wall Street Journal reported the nomination as a move to maintain continuity in monetary policy leadership. The single candidate format reduces uncertainty over succession while the central bank continues to manage inflation and currency stability. The journal noted that the absence of competing candidates allows markets to price in policy predictability during a period of global rate volatility. Indonesian officials have not announced a formal confirmation vote date. The sole candidate structure typically accelerates legislative approval. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage treats a new central bank governor as a simple personnel swap whose views will quickly dominate. In practice, many central banks operate under multi-year mandates, staggered board terms, and statutory inflation targets that limit how fast any single appointee can shift direction. Indonesia's central bank, for example, sets policy through a board whose members serve overlapping terms, so a new chair must still secure majority support for rate changes. Historical cases in other emerging markets show that when a sole candidate is named, markets often price in smoother continuity rather than abrupt reversal. Knowing this, when reports emphasize the new leader's past statements, readers can check whether the bank's legal framework actually allows rapid policy swings or whether the board structure and inflation target remain the stronger constraints. One concrete step is to review the central bank's published meeting calendar and voting records for the first 2 quarters after the appointment takes effect. If you want to go deeper on AI adoption in workplaces, compare how Nikkei Asia and South China Morning Post cover AI-related economic developments. Tomorrow, watch for any further Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy assets and their reported effects on diesel output. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective, and the calmest ones know that most days, somewhere, something is quietly getting better. For full source links, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View Summaries page. Share this with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. This show comes to you from the NARA Network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, Environmental Intelligence has you covered. The Environment and Climate Policy Brief for Canada. All our shows are free at naranetwork.com. Prefer reading? Today's full write-up, sources, and transcript are on the episode blog at naranetwork.com. Same briefing, readable format. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.